Ella Enchanted by Gail Carson Levine. Chapter 26. Lucinda gasped. I gasped too. She wasn't Lucinda. Or was she? The enormous eyes were the same, but not the height. This fairy was stooped with age, and her perfect skin was wrinkled, with a mole next to her nose. I was seeing the real Lucinda, unshielded by magic.
Mandy, who is this? You brought a human to spy on me?
She straightened for a moment, and I saw a hint of the young, beautiful Lucinda. Then she sighed.
You look familiar. Are you one of my victims?
This was my chance. The chance for the freedom I always should have had. The chance to escape from my stepfamily. The chance to win Char back. But I was so nervous. My voice was gone. I could only nod.
What did I do to you, child?
She whispered, as though afraid of my answer. I found my voice. You made me obedient. Now you know how it is.
I do, child.
She touched my cheek, and my heart rose.
But I can't help you. I renounced big magic.
Oh, lady, I pleaded. It would be a wondrous gift. I would be so grateful.
Ella?
Mandy warned.
Mandy, don't you think, just this once?
Lucinda shook her head, and wispy gray curls fluttered.
No, I mustn't. But if you ever have need of small magic, call on me. You only have to say the words, Lucinda, come to my aid.
She kissed my forehead.
I remember you now. I thought you only spoke Aorthian.
I begged her. I told her about my circumstances. I wept. She wept with me, sobbed harder than I did, but stood firm. I pleaded with Mandy to persuade her, but Mandy refused.
I can't, lady,
she said.
It was big magic to cast the spell in the first place, but it would be big magic to undo it too. Who can guess what would come of it?
Only good would come of it! Only good!
I can't bear this,
Lucinda wailed, wringing her hands dramatically.
I can't bear your distress. Farewell, child.
She vanished. I stormed out of Mandy's room and rushed to the library, where I could be alone, where no one was likely to make me scour anything, or sew anything, or say anything. Now I couldn't go to the balls. Hattie and Olive would go with Mum Olga. They'd be free to dance with Char, and so would every other young lady in Frel. And some lass would win him over. His nature was loving, and he'd find someone to love. As for me, I'd be lucky to glimpse him on the street. He wouldn't recognize me. My dirty servant's garb would rule out identification at a distance, and he'd never be close enough to see my face. I could neither go to the balls nor escape from them. Hattie and Mum Olga talked of nothing else. Even Olive was interested to the extent of worrying about her gown.
Sew it with gold thread,
she instructed her maid.
Shouldn't I be as fine as Hattie?
Shouldn't I be as fine as both of them? I cooked and scrubbed and waited on them in a fury. For 2 weeks I wouldn't speak to Mandy. The only sounds in the kitchen came from pots and pans as I slammed them down. Then it came to me. Why couldn't I go? Char needn't know I was there. Everyone would be masked. At the beginning, at least, although most would unmask quickly so he could admire their beauty. I never would. I'd see him, but he wouldn't see me. Where was the harm if he didn't recognize me? I decided to do it. I would fill my eyes with him. If I could approach him safely, I would fill my ears. If anyone questioned me, I wouldn't be Ella. I'd invent a new name. I'd be content in his presence. Nothing more. I'd have to be careful of Hattie and Olive and Mum Olga. They probably wouldn't recognize me in a mask and an elegant gown, but I'd do well to keep away from them, especially from Hattie. I made up with Mandy and told her my plan. She didn't comment on the risk I'd be taking, only asked,
Sweet, why go and break your heart again?
My heart was still broken. I would see Char, and it would mend. I'd leave him, and it would break again. There were 3 balls. It would break 3 times. I had grown tall enough to wear mother's gowns. Mandy chose the best 3 and altered them in keeping with the current fashion, even adding a graceful train that would follow me everywhere. Small magic, she said. She also found the mask I'd worn at Father's wedding, white, with tiny white beads along its edges. In the days preceding the ball, if there were moments when Char and the balls weren't in my mind, they were when I was asleep. Awake, I'd picture myself, radiantly beautiful, mounting the palace steps. I'd be late, and the whole court would be there already. An old servant would mutter,
At last, a damsel worthy of our prince.
People would turn to stare, and a sigh of envy or appreciation would rustle through the assembly. Char would hurry to... No, I wouldn't allow him to see me. The old servant might approve me, but I would slip in unnoticed by anyone else. Within, noblemen in my proximity would beg me to dance. I'd oblige them, and the steps would carry me near Char. He'd see me and wonder who I was. After the dance, he'd attempt to find me, but I'd elude him. The next time he'd see me, I'd be in the arms of another partner. I'd smile at the stranger, and Char's heart would be touched. My thoughts were nonsense. I would see Char and be invisible to him. Perhaps I'd see him fall in love with another maiden. At night, I searched my magic book for illustrations of Char or anything written by him. But the book fell open to pages written in Aorthian, written by AREIDA, in her diary. I read eagerly. She wrote,
The inn has never had such important guests before. Prince Charmant and his knights stayed here last night. Mother was so nervous she backed into the trestle table while curtsying. It went over and Antonepe's vase smashed into 100 pieces. Mother, father, I, Oyo, Uflimu, Isti, and even Eteme went down on our knees, picking up shards so the prince wouldn't step on something sharp. It was so crowded on the floor, I bumped into someone's shoulder. When I turned to apologize, I was face to face with the prince, who was crawling about with the rest of us. He insisted on paying for the vase. He said it never would have happened if not for him. Then he apologized for knocking into me. I couldn't answer him. No words would come. I could only nod and smile and hope I didn't seem too much of a bumpkin. At dinner, when I brought his ale, I did manage to speak, perhaps because I truly had a question, not simply a wish to impress. I told him I'd been at finishing school when Ella ran away, and I asked if he knew whether she was safe. When I said her name, one of the knights called out, "The ogre tamer? Whatever happened to her?" The prince was quiet for so long after my question that I worried I'd offended him. But when he spoke, he didn't seem angry. "You were her friend?" he asked. I told him that Ella was the best friend I'd ever had. He paused again, and I feared he would say that she had died. But he finally answered that he believed her to be well and married to a rich gentleman. He added, "She is happy, I think. She is rich, so she is happy." Without thinking, I blurted, "Ella doesn't care about riches." Then I realized I contradicted a prince. "How do you know?" he said. I answered, "At school, everyone hated me because I wasn't wealthy and because I spoke with an accent. She was the only one who was kind." "Perhaps she's changed," he said. "I don't think so, Your Highness." I contradicted him twice. That was the end of our conversation, and I shall remember it forever. I watched him all evening, before and after we talked. Before, he had talked and joked with his men. After, he spoke no more. Married? How could it be? I wish I could see her again.
I wished I could see AREIDA. I wished I could have seen Char's face when she defended me. But no illustrations accompanied her journal.